Good morning. Happy Friday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Good to have you with us on this Friday. Right now on Morning News Now, flight to safety, the latest on new efforts this morning to evacuate civilians from the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol. Just yesterday, Russian forces reportedly blocked a convoy of dozens of buses from leaving the area. The Red Cross saying it's now on its way to help people there. Comes as peace talks between Russian and Ukrainian delegations are expected to resume virtually. We've got team coverage of the war in Ukraine this morning. Crude in tension. Some much-needed relief at the pump may be on the way. That's after President Biden announced his administration will release around 1 million barrels of oil per day from the nation's petroleum reserve. But there is a major catch as prices soar because of the war in Ukraine. We're going to dig into when you might see those numbers drop. Plus, new developments in the Hunter Biden investigation, with officials now reportedly looking at the bigger picture as to whether the president's son violated federal lobbying laws. And better Nate than ever. A brand new story on Disney Plus today, all about following your heart to the Big Apple, being your authentic self. We're going to chat with the film's writer and director about the personal experiences that led to this landmark Disney picture. That movie is out today. I got a chance to see a sneak peek last week. It's adorable. It just brings a smile to your face. I'm glad that we can have Tim with us to talk about it.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear this conversation. We begin this hour in Ukraine, though, with more uncertainty over efforts to evacuate civilians trapped in Mariupol. Aid buses are trying again to get into the besieged city following multiple failed attempts. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has more from the eastern part of Ukraine.
We're now in a village on the outskirts of the city of Kharkiv that has been hit repeatedly by Russian artillery fire. Today, the Red Cross is trying once again to establish a humanitarian corridor to bring relief to the city of Mariupol after several failed attempts. Hope and anxiety this morning for some 100,000 Ukrainians trapped in the city of Mariupol. Ukrainian officials accused Russia of blocking and stealing humanitarian aid in the city, frustrating repeated attempts to open a safe passage for supplies to get in and residents to leave. Russian troops have flattened entire blocks in Mariupol, cut off food, water, and fuel. And in a tactic Russia often used in Syria, the Russians have denied residents health care by destroying hospitals and clinics, including, Ukraine says, this Red Cross shelter. But Russia's brutal advances suffered numerous setbacks, many of them self-inflicted, and some just reckless. A statement from Ukraine's state nuclear company says 2 columns of Russian troops left the Chernobyl nuclear disaster site, still highly radioactive from the 1986 meltdown. The company said the Russians left after digging trenches into the contaminated soil and receiving significant doses of radiation. Reuters quoted workers at the plant saying some soldiers didn't even know they were in a radiation zone, describing their behavior as suicidal. The Russian military, which took over Chernobyl early in the war, has said radiation levels have remained within a normal range. But is President Putin even being told about the missteps? Russia denies U.S. and British reports that Russian generals are keeping Putin in the dark. President Biden weighing in yesterday.
How badly is Vladimir Putin being misinformed by his advisors?
That's an open question. He seems to be self-isolated.
President Putin, his economy cut off from international finance, is now making new economic threats, saying unfriendly countries, which include the United States and Europe, will have to pay, starting today, for Russian national gas in rubles or risk being cut off. The United States has banned the purchase of Russian oil and gas, but Europe is far more dependent. Germany said it will not accept Russian blackmail. And today, several Russian officials accused the Ukrainian military of carrying out a cross-border strike with 2 Ukrainian helicopters allegedly entering Russian territory and destroying a fuel depot. Senior Ukrainian officials have not commented on the incident.
All right, Richard Engel, thank you so much.
Let's bring in former Deputy National Security Advisor to President George W. Bush and NBC Senior National Security Analyst Juan Zarate. Juan, good to have you with us. We're about almost 40 days now into this war. Putin has not achieved any of his major objectives. Where do you see this going now? What do you think we need to be prepared for?
Well, Joe, I think Putin has been backed into a corner here. He has not had the military advance that he expected. That may be because his military advisors are not telling him the truth. But the reality is he has faced Ukrainian resistance that nobody expected and a will to fight that has pushed back. He's been economically isolated in a way that he probably didn't expect, or at least not as rapidly or expansively as he's now feeling. And this is a dangerous moment, I think, because I think Putin is probably regrouping, thinking about how to re-strategize his approach and trying to strengthen his hand if there are to be any real negotiations, which I don't think we've really seen yet. But I do think this is a Russian president that sees his fate now wrapped into what happens in Ukraine. And he can't afford to lose this war where he has bet the prestige of Russia and his strategy and even his power on success in Ukraine.
You mentioned negotiations, not much headway being made there, but today there's another sliver of hope, though small, with a new round of peace talks underway. Are there any compromises that you think both Ukrainians and Russians would be open to at this point? What would that look like?
Savannah, you're right. I think you have to have these discussions. And Ukrainians have been, I think, very open to the discussions. They've been aggressive, leaning forward, very serious about them, including with their senior-most ministers involved. I think the Russians less so in terms of who they have representing and whether or not they're actually in communication with President Putin. But I think the negotiations are important in part to try to have humanitarian relief, try to get those corridors in. We see this now with Mariupol, trying to get civilians who've been stuck, who've been starved out. The Red Cross now heading in, hopefully able to get people in and out. So that's important. Humanitarian corridors that are respected. I think now, the Russians are tired. I think their supply chains are stretched. And I think this is a moment maybe where the Russians would be willing to have some ceasefires or to demonstrate they're willing to stop fighting in certain parts of the country or others. But as the Ukrainians have said, they don't really believe what the Russians say until they see it on the ground. And unfortunately, there's been a mismatch between what the Russians have promised and what they've actually done to restrain their force in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about some fascinating reporting from the New York Times, reporting that Russia is running its war from Moscow with no central command in Ukraine. Now, Syrian mercenaries are on their way to Ukraine to fight for Russia. What kind of impact do you think that will have? What do you make of all that?
Well, it's been curious. Military experts have seen that the Russians have been trying to run the operation in Ukraine through 4 military districts in the country. So there's no central command in Ukraine. It's 4 separate military districts that have tried to coordinate the air, the land, the sea operations, including out of Belarus. That has proven more complicated for the Russians. They've had trouble securing the air. The integration has been difficult, and they've been trying to do it out of the Russian Defense Ministry out of Moscow, and that has not worked. And now what you have, I think, is the Russians trying to regroup as to what their strategy looks like, how they replenish their troops, and perhaps even how they use other forces to include Syrians, to include their private military company, the Wagner Group, and others who are potentially now part of the force. But this has not been the Russian military's finest hour. And part of that likely has to do with how they've coordinated their operations or haven't on the ground in Ukraine.
Juan Zarate, thanks so much for your analysis this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, here at home, prices at the pump are still hovering near record highs, in large part because of Russia's war in Ukraine, of course. Well, now the Biden administration is taking a series of steps, including tapping reserves, in a move it hopes will lower the cost for everyone. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has those details.
Even with prices at the pump slowly starting to decline, the cost of fuel is still taking a major toll on our collective wallets. Now the administration will make a record tap into the nation's strategic petroleum reserve, releasing 1 million barrels per day, 180 million over the next 6 months.
Bottom line is, if we want lower gas prices, we need to have more oil supply right now.
Right now, the national average for a gallon of unleaded is hovering around $4.22, even higher in some places like California, nearly $6 a gallon, up more than 60 cents nationally from last month, $1.35 higher from last year. As the nation prepares to switch to costlier summer-grade gasoline next month, experts say tapping the reserves could provide some relief, with a major caveat.
The national average could spend most of the summer under $4 a gallon, so long as the situation between Russia and Ukraine does not significantly escalate.
For delivery drivers like Osman Malcolm in Chicago, where it's $4.84 a gallon, relief cannot come soon enough.
These gas prices are way out of control.
Malcolm says he spends about 12 hours a day in his car just to make enough tips to offset the price of filling up every day.
As soon as I open the car door, I just spent $120. And it's sad because it really hurts.
The White House also calling on Congress to make companies sitting on unused wells on public lands either use those resources or pay a fine. It's likely to face opposition in Washington and from corporations. The administration likely to roll out new fuel economy standards today, requiring 2026 model year vehicles to get an average of 49 miles to the gallon, nearly 10 miles per gallon better than last year's models. The president also invoking the Defense Production Act to encourage domestic production of materials used in electric vehicle batteries. But weaning off fossil fuels will take time. Until then, your best bet may be slowing down.
Even a 5 or 10 mile an hour decrease in speed can boost fuel efficiency anywhere from 10 to 20%.
Our thanks to Tom Costello for that report.
The massive storm system that left a path of destruction in the south is now making its way up the east coast. Millions of Americans are on alert this morning and bracing for what might come next. NBC's Jesse Kirsch joins us with the latest on the storm. Jesse, good morning to you.
Good morning, Joe. You can see the sky's starting to clear up here in New York City. It's still chilly and a bit windy from time to time, but this is just the tail end of a massive severe system that's been sweeping across much of the country.
Overnight, storms barreling from the south to the northeast. Millions there waking up to the aftermath of severe thunderstorms overnight, leaving some areas along the Atlantic coast severely damaged from the same system that hit the south earlier this week. In Pennsylvania, torrential downpours and fallen trees creating hazardous roads. In Virginia, a possible tornado caught on camera, appearing to touch down.
I'm in the tornado. Holy.
A nearby gas station also rattled by damaging winds, creating a mess. Louisiana police releasing body cam footage of a 3-car crash being blamed on high winds in the area. And in North Carolina, at a Pfizer plant, thunderstorms producing possible tornadoes racing across the area at more than 50 miles per hour. In the storm-battered south, residents picking up the pieces after more than 24 tornadoes since Wednesday.
It vibrated the house. I just kept reassuring my family we're going to be okay, we're okay, we're okay.
And in the Florida Panhandle, authorities say 2 people are dead and 2 others injured after one of those tornadoes ripped through homes there.
Parts of Florida will see isolated strong storms today, but most of the East Coast should soon be in the clear, at least for now. Joe?
All right, Jesse, thanks so much. Let's get more on the forecast and a check on your morning news now weather.
Which means Bill Cairns is back with us this hour. Hey, Bill.
Yeah, good Friday. So the Northeast is kind of quieting down a little bit. It'll be showery and even some snow showers today. If anyone is going to get any thunderstorms, it's going to be in Florida. We had some heavy rain overnight, right over the top of that I-4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando. Currently, those storms are over the Space Coast into the Melbourne area, and we'll be watching hit and miss showers and storms during the day today. This is where our cold front is kind of stalled out. That push of chilly air is going to stall right along I-4. So once again, minor travel delays on I-4, also flying in and out of Tampa or Orlando airports. You could have some minor delays. Then this boundary slips a little bit to the south on Saturday, and then another little wave of low pressure, a little weak storm comes through. So expect heavy rains come Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. So if you're going to head to the beach in Florida, do it early Saturday because the afternoon looks pretty stormy and pretty rainy from Tampa to Clearwater to Fort Myers to Naples and even on the East Coast beaches too. Finally, it will clear out by Sunday. Heaviest rainfall totals right in between Tampa, Orlando, and Melbourne. Maybe 1 to 2 inches. Isolated cases of flooding on some of the roads. So let's get into your weekend forecast. The areas that were hit really hard by the severe weather this week will have a beautiful day today. Temperatures in the 70s in the south, 60s, not a problem at all. Still kind of cold and chilly, though. Snow squalls possible. Ohio, Pennsylvania, and also western New York. And the first weekend of April has arrived. Rain and storms in Florida, as we mentioned. Also, not a pretty day from Milwaukee to Chicago. Upper 30s, low 40s, rain and snow showers on your Saturday. A nice day on Saturday for the East Coast. No problems in the West, but the Pacific Northwest will have some stormy weather late Saturday and then into Sunday. Kind of gloomy 50s and kind of cloudy for the beginning of your April. But I'd say about 90% of the country is looking for a pretty nice spring April weekend. And no severe weather in sight, so maybe we can carry this into next week.
Yeah, sounds good. We're going to take it
I hope
as far
so.
as we can.
I hope so. All right, thanks, Bill. Have a good weekend. Now, there are growing signs that the federal investigation of President Biden's son, Hunter, is broader than earlier thought, and Republicans in Congress are turning up the heat. Here's NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams with more.
People familiar with the federal investigation of Hunter Biden, which he himself disclosed a year and a half ago, say it's broader now than he at first described it, with a growing number of witnesses called before a grand jury. It began as an examination of whether he paid all the taxes he should have on income from his work for foreign companies, including Burisma Holdings, a Ukrainian energy company. This email from a former business partner, for example, found on a laptop computer Biden used, said he failed to disclose $400,000 that he was paid by the Ukrainian company. That laptop, which he took to a Delaware shop to get repaired but never reclaimed, was seized by the FBI, but not before Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani got a copy of its hard drive, which he shared with congressional Republicans. Documents they've made public show that accounts linked to Biden also received nearly $4 million in consulting contracts from a Chinese energy company, according to an analysis by the Washington Post. But during the campaign, then candidate Biden denied there was a China connection.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China?
Senate Republicans say the documents also show Hunter Biden signed an agreement to represent an official of that company, Patrick Ho, for $1 million. Ho was later convicted in a U.S. court of trying to bribe government officials in Africa. The Republicans say that shows Hunter Biden had close ties to the Chinese government.
Hunter Biden was financially connected to CEFC, a company that was an arm of the communist Chinese regime.
Now, according to people familiar with the investigation, it has broadened out to look at whether he violated federal lobbying disclosure laws. The investigation is being run by the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, a holdover from the Trump administration, and officials say it's a long way from over.
Our thanks to Pete Williams for that report. And coming up on this hour of Morning News Now, preparing for the worst, training for a war that's on your doorstep.
Regular Polish citizens at the ready if Russia comes knocking. How one camp is laying the groundwork for battle as the conflict drags on with uncertain consequences. After this.
Welcome back. In Ukraine, survival stories from people fleeing some of the hardest hit areas of the country are emerging. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez listened to some of those accounts and looked at the efforts being made to shelter people escaping the violence.
This is the heart-stopping drive out of southeastern Ukraine, as seen from the car of Olga Kachakova.
How hard was the journey from Mariupol?
It was horrible, she says. The city is destroyed completely. These are more images from her neighborhood, now a ghost town. This man, who asked us not to show his face, says he was with Mariupol's territorial defense, his hand shattered by what he tells us was a Russian grenade.
Do you think that Mariupol might eventually fall?
No, never. But he says the Russians captured his father, and he hasn't heard from him in almost 2 weeks. Here in Vinnytsia, a humanitarian hub has sprung up. Of, in all places, a mall. Organizer Anna Chernikova says it's already helped more than 2,000 refugees.
When people are coming, I understand that by my heart.
Because she's been through it. She fled the Donbass region after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014.
I never saw my grandma again, and she's died already.
Her brother was a young boy when they rushed out, and the psychological toll it took still haunts her.
He didn't talk for 1 year. So when I saw these children, I even couldn't recognize what it will be in future with each generation.
Olga Lysichank came here 2 weeks ago from the Donbass region with 14 family members. The printing company she built from scratch was leveled. I don't know what to do, she says. Here, for so many, the future is uncertain, but they're holding on.
I just believe that it will be a victory for Ukraine. It couldn't be another way.
Just days ago, Ukrainian authorities say that a Russian airstrike targeted the country's Air Force command in this area. And earlier in the war, the city's civilian airport was destroyed. So officials here are on very high alert. Back to you.
Heartbreaking, just those stark images. Thanks to Gabe Gutierrez for that story.
Polish civilians are now getting military training in case the war in Ukraine spills over the border into their country. They're learning about everything from how to use weapons to basic first aid. NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns takes us to a training camp in southern Poland.
For Poland, serving as the largest hub for Ukrainian refugees can also serve as a reminder that it could happen here. That's what inspired this civilian training camp in the mountain town of Nowy Targ.
How did all of this get started?
The Russian invasion on Ukraine caused many civilians in our region to be afraid of their life, of their security, their families, their homeland. They ask, they call, they email every day. They just want to learn how to shoot, how to react in face of war situation if the conflict would come to us.
With the conflict on their doorstep, Colonel Marcin Marcinek of the Polish Army Reserves is helping everyday people prepare for the possibility of war spilling over their border.
How many of the people here have never even held or shot a gun?
Most of them didn't shot before.
Every Sunday, a group of 25 or so civilians learn how to assemble and disassemble weapons, how to shoot rifles and pistols, how to throw a grenade. They practice emergency first aid and basic survival skills. The colonel says they already have a waiting list of hundreds.
We just saw strikes in Lviv, so close to the border. What's it like for you to see action on your doorstep?
I think that people are more interested in defense issues.
People like Tadeusz Morava, who came here with his 18-year-old son.
We're very worried. I'm interested in history. I'm watching closely the situation. And I know that Poland has been through such situations, through such horrors in Second World War. It reminds me very closely what's happening in Kiev or in Mariupol to our capital, Warsaw, that has been destroyed.
That's your father? No. Father right there?
This history hits home for Ted. His father fought in World War II and became a political prisoner in the Soviet Union.
You brought your son here with you today. Why?
I brought in my son because you have to fight for your homeland. Poland is in a situation that we might have to protect it, just like our fathers, just like my father and my son's grandfather did.
What did you think when your father asked you to come?
I thought it's a good idea, and it's worth to do this.
And it's not just civilians. Local leaders tell us they're working to ensure they're prepared to keep residents safe. And as for the military...
Is the Polish military preparing for the possibility of war?
In accordance with an old Latin saying, "Sevis pacem para bellum," translated into English, if you want peace, be prepared for war.
The Polish population has watched the fighting in Ukraine for weeks now. Those we've spoken with say they can't help but imagine the shoe on the other foot.
If the war does cross the border here into Poland, will you fight?
For sure.
And you?
Of course.
That was Dasha Burns reporting in Poland. Now to South America, where the number of refugees making the dangerous journey across the region known as the Darian Gap is quickly rising, especially among Venezuelans.
They're making their way north, but the path to a better life has become more difficult. From visas to Mother Nature, the refugees are taking a big risk by leaving their homes behind. NBC News correspondent Guad Benegas explains why so many are being pushed to make the trek anyway.
desperation and necessity for thousands of refugees crossing a treacherous and deadly jungle in search for a better future. For months, families have been making the journey. Mothers carrying their babies, men traveling with the few belongings they could carry, walking for days across the Darian Gap. This deadly region, tucked between Colombia and Panama, has become a human smuggling corridor. Hundreds of thousands of people making their way from South America in hopes of making it to the U.S.-Mexico border. This week, Panamanian authorities warning the number of migrants crossing in 2022 is growing. In the first 2 months of this year, the number of crossings already tripling compared to the same period last year. The number of Venezuelans in particular skyrocketing. According to a new report by the UN Refugee Agency, more than 2,500 Venezuelans have crossed the Darian Gap in the first 2 months of 2022. Almost reaching the entire total of those who crossed last year.
It's hard to overstate how perilous this journey is, and it speaks to the desperation that people are feeling.
Many escaping the crushing economic toll of the Maduro regime and the impact of COVID-19, now displacing those who previously settled in other countries like Colombia, Chile, and Peru. Late last year, their options to flee becoming more limited, with visa requirements for travel to Mexico and most of Central America.
To a certain degree, these sort of new visa requirements really drive people to find more dangerous ways to make their journeys.
Do you have any idea of where these Venezuelans are headed?
But they're headed north. Some will, maybe try to reach the United States. The trend is that more Venezuelans are seeking asylum at the southern border of Mexico.
While some choose to remain in Mexico, others are expected to reach the United States, where the Biden administration has offered temporary protective status to Venezuelans in the U.S.
Thanks to Guad Venegas for that report. Now let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Claudio Labanga joins us from Rome. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Well, let's start in Sri Lanka, where dozens of protesters were injured during an attempt to storm the president's house. The authorities had to use tear gas and water cannon against the protesters who were calling for the president and the entire cabinet to resign over their handling of the economic crisis. A lot of people in Sri Lanka still don't have the gas for cooking or medicines or fuel. And let's move to China, where the state-run TV network will resume airing NBA games. This comes after a blackout that started back in 2019 when former Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey tweeted an image supporting protests in Hong Kong. There have been temporary returns, including during the 2020 NBA Finals. Well, the NBA believes China is key to its international growth. Last but not least, meet Spot, a robot dog who is helping restore the ancient city of Pompeii. The goal is for Spot to walk around Pompeii and monitor existing buildings for structural weaknesses and assess the progress of restoration work and search digs. Now, Spot is equipped with a laser-based scanner and a 360 degrees camera, which eventually, guys, will probably spot that pack of stray dogs that usually live in the Pompeii. I don't know whether you've been there recently. I don't know what they'll make of Spot, though. We'll see.
Right. They might. Maybe they'll become friends. You never know.
I haven't been recently, but I am kind of obsessed with Pompeii and the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. So that's a very cool story to me. Claudio, thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. All right, coming up on Morning News Now, Finding Your Voice. Our conversation with the writer and director of a brand new Disney movie, all about being your authentic self and finding your heart even to Broadway.
Plus, the growing fallout surrounding that infamous Oscar slap. New controversy this morning over how the Academy handled the aftermath. Those stories and more up next.
At a time when LGBTQ issues are making headlines almost daily, a new Disney movie is out that has LGBTQ themes. It's called Better Nate Than Ever and tells the story of a 13-year-old theater kid who leaves his hometown of Pittsburgh, heads to Broadway so he can audition for a musical.
Manhattan Island, baby. It's an open audition. Tomorrow. Ever since we were little, we've been like, we should take a road trip to New York someday. Just you and me. So I had this crazy idea.
They're making Lilo and
gonna do a Broadway musical? Wow.
Nate Foster, yes?
The movie, which starts streaming today on Disney Plus, is written and directed by Tim Federle. It's based on a book he wrote, a story inspired by his own experience, growing up gay and dreaming of moving to the Big Apple. And Tim joins us now to talk more about Better Nate Than Ever. Tim, good to have you with us. I was lucky enough to go to the screening you had last week. The movie made me smile, so I'm so grateful that you've come on to talk to us. I mean, tell us, what do you think is the movie's main message, and how important is that message right now?
Thank you, Joe. The main message is find your people. And I think for so many people, I grew up a theater kid in Pittsburgh like Nate. And there for a long time, I thought I had to change myself to fit in. And it turns out I really just had to change my zip code. And that was, moving to New York and finding my club.
It was the same experience I had when I moved to college and finding my own club as well. If you had seen a movie like this when you were a kid, what do you think that would have meant to you?
I would have felt less lonely and more inspired. I grew up seeing these movies like Ferris Bueller, Adventures in Babysitting, and I love these movies. They're family movie nights, and they're really fun to share that core memory with your family. But I had never quite seen a kid like Nate at the center, and it would have meant a lot to me to see this when I was a kid.
So, Tim, this is a Disney movie. We know Disney has been thrust into this debate about Florida's new law. It's now a law, the so-called Don't Say Gay law. You said there's a real opportunity for the company here and really companies like Disney. What is that opportunity, do you think?
Well, I think the first opportunity I can speak to as a content creator is to offer greater representation for the big, wide audience that exists out there. So I hope movies like Better Nate Than Ever are a step in the right direction for inclusivity. And then I think the sort of opportunity in the back halls of companies like Disney are to really make sure that they're supporting the type of legislation. And look, Bob Iger yesterday said this is a difference between right and wrong. It's not a political issue. It's about human rights, and it's about making the world a safer and more inclusive space. And so I hope a movie like this does a little part of that. And I think the rest of it is up to people above my pay grade.
Well, I have you. I want to ask you about your lead, played by a newcomer, Ruby Wood. You have a good story about Ruby's audition, right?
Yeah, we saw 500 kids for the role of Nate. Ruby is the only one who came in and sang a song from Wicked. And, the minute a boy sings a song from Wicked, he's like, okay, that kid's like born to play Nate. And he had never been on camera before. I truly do believe this is a Star is Born moment. And it's been thrilling to watch him really step into his light.
Great to see. Not just any song, it was Defying Gravity, right?
It was Defying Gravity. Yes, it was Adina. And he nailed it.
All right.
He nailed the high note.
Wow.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Again, the movie is out streaming today on Disney Plus. Good luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
Now to the ongoing fallout from the Oscars. As Chris Rock continues his nightclub comedy circuit, we're hearing conflicting reports over whether Will Smith was asked, in fact, to leave the award show that night after he slapped Chris Rock. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is in Boston with more.
As the review of that Oscar slap heats up in Los Angeles, here in Boston, Chris Rock took to the stage again. He's still not sharing many details, but we are learning more.
Overnight, Chris Rock in the spotlight again at his latest round of shows in Boston. According to People magazine, the comedian shut down an audience member who cursed Will Smith last night. Overall, Rock has largely avoided talking about the slap by Smith, sticking to jokes and video emerging from his first show after the incident.
How was your weekend?
It comes amid conflicting reports over how the shocking incident was handled by the Academy.
Will Smith just smacked out of me.
A day after the Board of Governors said in a statement, Mr. Smith was asked to leave the ceremony and refused, a source at the award show tells NBC News the official decision came from one of the show's producers, who ultimately asked the actor to stay.
They were saying, this is battery, was the word they used in that moment.
Oscar broadcast producer Will Packer telling ABC News he was there when LAPD officers asked Chris Rock about pressing charges.
They said, we will go get him. We are prepared. We're prepared to get him right now. You can press charges. We can arrest him. And they said, would you like us to take any action? And he said no. He said no.
Quoting unnamed sources, Variety says Academy leaders met briefly with an apologetic Will Smith on Zoom this week. The Academy would not confirm that report. The board says disciplinary proceedings against Smith have begun. The superstar issued a statement apologizing to Rock, but has not responded to our request for comment.
Oh, wow! Wow!
With every moment dissected on social media, this new TikTok video revealing another view of Jada Pinkett Smith reacting to the incident. And a separate TikTok video showing the moments after the incident as the broadcast moved on, Rock reacting. Rock has not addressed the controversy in detail.
Hey, Chris, you ready for tonight?
Instead, choosing to stick with his long-planned show.
I'm still kind of processing what happened.
Will Smith has about 2 weeks now to submit a response to the Academy Board of Governors, making his case for what happened and how it all went down. He could face anything from expulsion to losing his Oscar, though many people think that is highly unlikely. We should learn that decision in the middle of next month. Back to you.
Miguel Almaguer, thank you.
We're learning more details this morning about the shocking announcement of Bruce Willis's retirement. The actor's family announced he'd be retiring from Hollywood after being diagnosed with aphasia. Now, crew members on set for some of his latest movies are speaking out about what they noticed working with Willis recently. One director even told us he'd been worried about Willis for years.
Come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
As one of Hollywood's top action heroes, Bruce Willis never backed down on the big screen. Now the star is facing a real-life challenge. His family says Willis will be stepping away from his acting career after he developed the brain disorder aphasia. While it's not known when the actor was diagnosed, crew members from recent productions tell the LA Times he showed signs of cognitive decline. Director Mike Burns worked with Willis on multiple films and says he noticed something may have been wrong after a 12-hour shoot day in 2020.
He was tired, and I can see that there was also some cognitive issues going on, and I, was concerned at that point.
Several sources told the LA Times Willis struggled with his memory and was fed lines through an earpiece or so-called earwig on sets. A device Burns told us Willis used to assist with dialogue on a film they shot in October. This clip from the 2021 film American Siege also appears to show the actor wearing a small earpiece.
I wouldn't go there.
But the production company did not return our request for comment. Willis is not Hollywood's first star to be diagnosed with aphasia, which can affect a person's ability to speak and understand language. Game of Thrones star Emilia Clarke opened up about her battle with the condition to The New Yorker in 2019, saying at one point she was unable to recall her own name.
My brain was screaming it. It was screaming the answer, but I knew that I wasn't forming the words. I couldn't make sense. It was the scariest thing I've ever experienced in my life.
Well, Clarke has since recovered. For some patients, the condition may not improve and can get worse. Former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who suffered a traumatic brain injury in a shooting attack, tweeted, "I'm thinking of Bruce Willis and his family today. Aphasia makes it hard for me to find the right words. It can be lonely and isolating." The Willises are calling this a really challenging time. Daughters Rumor and Scout posted photos of their father from their childhood, thanking fans for the outpouring of love. Even though Bruce Willis will not be taking up any new projects, the actor already has several films in post-production, including the one he shot with Mike Burns last year, which is set to premiere this summer. Time for our CNBC Money Minute. We're taking a look at breaking news, that latest jobs report.
Seema Modi joins us now with those numbers. Hey, Seema.
Hey guys, 431,000 jobs added in the month of March. That's a slight miss on estimates, and it is down from the 678,000 added in February. The unemployment rate did tick down just a bit to 3.6%. The participation rate did move higher, which is encouraging. Now, despite volatile oil prices and inflation concerns, the jobs market here in the U.S. has been relatively strong, averaging 500,000 jobs a month. Businesses have been calling out the fact that there's a lack of workers in the market and just how tight the job market has been, especially in the hospitality industry, where a number of workers pivoted to jobs in warehouses, companies like Amazon, where the average pay can be higher. The Federal Reserve has already determined that the jobs market remains very strong for its focus to turn to fighting inflation. That's why we saw rates rise last month, and another 5 rate increases are expected this year. The stock market reaction so far has been generally positive. The Dow is implied to open up by around 127 points. Vanna, back to you.
All right, Seema, thank you.
Thanks, Seema.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.